Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah for joining us on this week's An-Nur the Light. We live in unprecedented times, and this calls for unprecedented actions. As you can see, we have now embraced the new normal and joining millions of people around the world who are now communicating in this way. COVID-19 has upended our way of living, and its effects can be felt long after the virus has been brought under control. Let's dive right into this week's story as we take a look at the case for Ivermectin, which has caused a lot of debate amongst the medical fraternity.
On March 26, 2020, South Africa ended its lockdown after the outbreak of the COVID-19 coronavirus hit its shores. In an earlier televised address, President Cyril Ramaphosa emphasized the necessity of doing this in order to save lives. At the time, there was no cure for the virus, and countries around the world had started shutting down and closing their borders. Almost a year later, the race to find an effective cure is still on, and with some vaccines showing promise. In the meantime, people continue to die at an alarming rate.
So I think COVID-19 actually surfaced around last year, December, which is when we heard about it. And, at the back of my mind, I wondered if it would come to South Africa. And then lo and behold, the WHO declares it a pandemic on the 11th of March. Shortly after that, we had a huge meeting at work to discuss the pandemic. We didn't know whether we would be facing the same fate as Italy and other countries. I myself went on my own social media campaign to create awareness, to advocate people to stay home, to practice sanitizing, not to visit their elderly parents, to get tested quickly if they were symptomatic.
As people get desperate, all kinds of cures are being offered. Some are straight out of a B-grade movie, while others may well have some effect. One such drug is Ivermectin, and it has caused huge debate amongst the medical fraternity.
As doctors, we network, and there's been a lot of conversation. Everything is pretty much hush-hush, things go on. So the doctors that are treating COVID-19, they don't have the time. They definitely don't have the energy to actually start doing these trials. It is a catch-22 situation. Although we need the trials, physically, I don't think it's possible to do it. If the drug is available, which it is, it's easily manufactured, it's accessible, it's affordable, so it's really cheap compared to some of the drugs that are being used. There is data in the literature supporting its use. I mean, it's a necessity for us. It's to prevent COVID-19 infection. Who's going to run the system if everything collapses?
Ivermectin was developed and is used mostly in treating animals for varying diseases. In some countries, it is approved for human use and has been known to successfully treat certain illnesses. The South African Health Products Registration Body, or SAHPRA, as it's known, however, didn't clear it for use in humans, as no one had applied to do this. Many doctors who wanted to prescribe it couldn't do so without having to complete heaps of paperwork.
Well, I'm a general practitioner, which means that I can prescribe any drugs because we're allowed to prescribe, but ivermectin is illegal. So if it was legal, I would prescribe it for my patients. I would prescribe it for prevention. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that they should not be taking the vaccine, not at all. I am saying the vaccine's not here now. Ivermectin is. It's complementary. So until we get the vaccine, let's put some money behind this.
Durban-based Dr. Nasiba Kathrada penned a letter to the president that soon went viral. In it, she calls on President Cyril Ramaphosa to allow the use of ivermectin, as well as for doctors to prescribe it to their patients without the added burden of making an application for every time they wanted to prescribe it.
Well, the reason I wrote the letter was I've been working extensively with COVID doctors and patients. And 2 days before I wrote the letter, my best friend called me, and she was hysterical on the phone, beside herself, sobbing. And she said that, please can I verify her mother had died at a hospital. So I had called the hospital in question, got hold of somebody there, and eventually got the answer that she had died 7 minutes prior to my phone call, and it was true. And then I had to phone my friend back and tell her, and she was sobbing, and just listening to her, and I couldn't do anything over the phone, and I feel like I was doing so much, but I was doing nothing. I wrote the letter, and when I wrote it out, I've got a group of doctors, and I said, let me put it in the group and see maybe somebody's interested in just adding their name to it. One of the doctors on the group sent me a message to say, why don't we do a sign-on petition so we can add our names? So yeah, alhamdulillah, we've gone to over 500 doctors now who have backed the message. I think the difference with my letter compared to the others that are out there, because there are others, is that I didn't write it from a medical point of view as such. I wrote it from a personal point of view as a doctor, what I'm seeing, and I wrote it from my heart.
Dr. Kathrada and others took SAHPRA to court to challenge them withholding permission. The court, together with SAHPRA, then handed down a ruling allowing for the compassionate use of the drug.
Since my letter, I've got an overwhelming response from doctors. I've got an overwhelming response from general public. I do know that 2 groups have sent in a Section 21. As yet, neither of them has got even confirmation from SAHPRA that they have received the application. So when they keep announcing no Section 21s have been sent in, that's not true. And I know that it was sent in via email and via the online portal. So you cannot anymore say no Section 21s have been handed in.
For Dr. Kathrada, however, the ruling was not enough, and she is involved in a second court application to allow doctors an even wider use of the drug.
Because before it was made illegal, we heard stories about it all the time, because it is on quite a few hospital protocols. And then the stories around Facebook are amazing, and people told their stories of how it's changed their lives. And if you seeing that on Facebook and you as a person can't access it yourself, that's wrong. And if I'm as a doctor can see the results in my own country and I can't prescribe it for my patients, how wrong is that?
As the court cases wait to be heard, more people continue to face the real prospect of dying. As long as the deadly virus is around, life as we know it may not return back to what it was anytime soon. In the meantime, scientists and medical teams are working around the clock to find an effective vaccine for the COVID-19 pandemic.
The jury remains out, and while there are numerous vaccines in different phases, there is still a long way to go to fully understand the virus and, in turn, the cure. Our mental and physical well-being has definitely taken a knock, and we decided to add something to the program that can aid with this. Zainab Ebrahim is passionate about wellness, and she happily agreed to share her knowledge on the topic on a bi-monthly basis.
I greet you with the universal greeting of peace. Welcome everybody. My name is Zainab and I'm a certified life coach. And I am going to speak to you today about emotional wellness. Before I do that, I thought it's best to start with a little story as it'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So, many years ago, there were 2 brothers who were raised by an abusive father. So emotional abuse, physical abuse, they endured that for years. And the result of that was that years later, the father had passed on and both brothers were now fully grown and living their lives. The one brother had become an abusive man, extremely unhappy and emotionally unwell. And the other brother had become extremely successful in all aspects of his life. So a reporter decided to do a story on them both and interviewed both of them. And the reporter then asked the brother that had become the abuser, so how did you end up this way? And the brother said, well, if you look at my father, how did you expect me to end up? And then the reporter asked the brother that was successful, so how did you end up this way? And the brother said, well, if you look at my father, how did you expect me to end up? So the moral of that story really is that we have a choice in life. Do we want to become victims and blame our past, blame our parents for our circumstance? Or do we want to become victors and really use those experiences as stepping stones to become the best version of ourselves? So according to the National Center of Emotional Wellness, what emotional wellness really is, it is termed as being aware of your emotions, understanding your emotions, and accepting your emotions. And those are really key and fundamental because we've been so conditioned, perhaps from a young age, to always suppress our emotions. If we're not feeling great, push it aside and just carry on. And what happens years later is it just continues to compound and compound and compound. And before you know it, you become, for example, this really angry person because you've suppressed anger for so many years, accepted things that you weren't happy with. And then it could be that the slightest event starts triggering you and you lose your temper. And what happens is then people look at you, especially your family, and can't understand, well, why are you so angry? And the reason for that is purely because you haven't dealt with your emotions. And what happens is you become angry, and afterwards you feel guilty, and it's this continuous vicious cycle of feeling negative emotions. So the healthier alternative is to become aware, okay, this is how I'm feeling, identify it, understand it, and more importantly, accept it. And for me, awareness is everything. Once I become aware of my emotions and I don't push them aside anymore, I can actually deal with them. So life happens, you go through change, you go through challenges, and accepting your emotions makes it just so much easier. So let's unpack emotions a bit more. Emotions are... The American Center of Disease Control, or the CDC as we know it, has done studies, and they've discovered that we have an average of about 60,000 thoughts that go through our mind on an average day. So you can imagine that your mind is running all the time. It's on autopilot, basically. And what we don't realize is our mind's actually controlling us. What they've also discovered is that 85% of those thoughts are negative. So if you just think about that for a moment, I'm sure all of you would agree. And what that means, or the other thing that they discovered, was that 75% of those 60,000 thoughts are thoughts we had yesterday. And what we find is we're either stuck in the past, replaying scenarios over and over and over, or we're worried about the future, what's going to happen, worst case scenario. So we're never really present. And it's really in being present that we can experience happiness. So I'm saying, if you're emotionally well, it doesn't mean that you're happy all the time. However, you just have the skill and the ability to manage your emotions better. So now that I've created awareness for you, because for me, awareness is really key. You are aware that you have about an average of 60,000 thoughts going through your mind. You know that 85% of them are negative. So now with that awareness, you can become aware, oops, and just catch your thoughts. Oh, I just had a negative thought for a moment. And what do you do in that moment? You just say, thank you for sharing, delete, delete, delete. And that's really the tip that I have for you. It works brilliantly, especially when you're training your mind to start shifting from negative to positive. It's just catch the thought, thank you for sharing, delete, delete, delete. Speak to yourself really kindly. And if you want to, take it a step further, try and clear your mental space. In other words, try not to watch too much negative TV, crime, the news, for example, because that again also drags you down. And the way that you know that is you feel down. And when you feel down, you need to just be aware, okay, what have I been thinking that's causing me to feel down? Because our thoughts affect the way we feel. And then start shifting your focus to rather focus on things that make you happy. For me, listening to music or watching a comedy instead of a horror movie really helps you until you get to a point where you take control of your mind and you are able to focus and move forward and think about the thoughts that would serve you. So I hope that's been beneficial, and until we meet next time, I wish you a blessed week ahead. Thank you.
As human beings, it is important for us to take care of our physical, mental, and emotional well-being, and this segment will aid in doing so. If you have any questions for Zainab, please do send them to us. Details listed on screen. Sustainable farming methods have retaken the world and allow for crops, livestock, and other manners of farming to be done in an environmentally friendly way. We explored this topic a little more and visited with some farmers who are doing just this.
Sustainable farming practices are on the rise globally as both consumers and producers of food realize the value derived from it. Islam places great emphasis on food that is good, wholesome and pure, among that which is permissible. On the west coast of South Africa, one family have decided to ensure they implement and adhere to the practice of respecting the land, the animals and the food they farm with.
Sustainable farming, the way we used to farm 50, 60 years ago, it's about just, allowing the land to breathe and allowing the land to rotate, etc. And what I mean by that is if you have animals, you let them graze around the land. It's about giving back to the earth and making sure that when we farm this land, that it can be farmed in 50 years' time, 100 years' time, 200 years' time from now.
The farm started out as a weekend getaway where the owner and his family could spend time out of the city and indulge in a bit of recreational farming. At first, they grew only vegetables, but the harvest was bountiful and they started distributing it to friends and family. As word got out, others also started placing orders and the owners realized there was a business opportunity.
We bought this farmland about 30 years ago, which started out as a place to go to for a break, and we started herding some sheep, etc. We chose sustainable farming because it was the right thing to do and it was the more natural way to do things. Probably about 10, 12 years ago, we started questioning where our food came from. We were actually very surprised to see what was going into our food. So we questioned that and we said, hold on a second. We want to do something where it's more sustainable and more healthy for us long term. So for us, it's also about a healthy living and a balanced lifestyle.
With 22,000 hectares of farmland available, it was decided to bring cattle and sheep on board. The owners, however, didn't just want any kind of cattle and opted to go into farming with Wagyu and Angus cows.
The cattle that we see here is the Angus and the Wagyu. We tag all our animals, so we have an electronic tagging system. And that's the way that we understand and know where that animal is, how that animal is being reared, and also helps hugely with traceability. The way we got these cattle into South Africa was many, many moons ago. There was an embryo program where embryos were imported to South Africa, and then the embryos were implanted and impregnated by dames. When the progeny got born, there was a 100% Wagyu that came out. So we followed the same principles, and we got, we got our breeding bulls out of that.
For the owners, it was important to produce the best they could, and both their Wagyu and Angus are certified to the highest standards by the South African Regulatory Board. They also believe that the sea air has become a unique ingredient in making their meat taste better.
We are at the moment at the border of the farm, which is right on the coast here. What this actually means for us is that, often our cattle just comes through and they will wade into the water to cool down on a hot summer's day. Very relaxing, very soothing. The second thing is that even though we haven't proven it, we are pretty sure that the sea breeze that comes over the farm brings residue of salt and lays it on the natural flora here, which gives the animals a really good salt intake, which is very good for their diets as well. So it's a natural process.
For Haroon and the team, the foundation of their farming was built on sustainable practices. All animals are allowed to wander freely, and the vegetables are grown free from pesticide and harmful chemicals. This ties in with their own Islamic values, and the environment is better because of it.
The Islamic principle of halal is also associated strongly with taib. So what taib means is the way you raise an animal. Now there's two aspects here. Number one is the way we raise our animals is stress-free. We've got our shepherds on horseback rather than on motorbikes. We allow the animals the calves and the lambs to be with their mothers for a long time. We don't wean them off. And that all plays in part of taib and the way you treat an animal.
The demand for their meats and produce continued, and Haroon had to very quickly find an innovative way to sell. He chose to go online and in so doing, start the very first halal retail butcher in cyberspace.
not only do we look at the grass-fed and the free range, but we invest in top genetics in our breeding program, which means that we look at the top end of animals to breed with, which means that the quality of our product at the end of the day is of a very high quality, international standard quality, that we are actually here being able to supply here in South Africa locally.
The online butcher proved to be even more popular than Haroon could ever imagine. And it was decided to have a flagship store where clients could come and collect their meats and also see the products up close.
The quality of the meat, and you can source where it's from. Everything's free range, organic. And you also have 4 small kids, so I mean, it's important what they eat.
The convenience for me is the online platform. So I can go onto their websites. I follow the link usually on their Instagram, and then I just go and browse through. They have like a sales section, and then you just click add to cart, and it just gets it's next day delivery.
I enjoy coming to the store for braais. I'll choose steak. You can see the different grades of marbling on the meat, and the lamb also has nice marbling on it, so that's why I enjoy coming to the store.
Farming sustainably has proven to be a recipe for success for Haroon and the team. With Islam as their foundation, these weekend farmers have started a revolution for ethically sourced meats and produce. The road ahead is paved with goodwill that has come of this endeavor.
It has been a taxing year that will go down in the annals of our history for the struggle and strife we've had to endure. Thankfully, we have you and you have us to inform and educate about the South African Muslim community. It's time for me to go, but I will be back next week, same time, same place. Kenna mare mokwanda kiri ari bueri bonanang khape. Assalamu alaikum.